1934, Berlin-Lichterfelde. Karl Ernst, 29, was on his knees before a firing squad. The order came from Adolf Hitler. That same morning, he was trying to set off for his honeymoon from the port of Bremerhaven. He had married the day before. Before he rose to the top of the SA, he worked as a doorman at gay clubs in Berlin. He was homosexual. In a regime that persecuted and imprisoned men like him, Ernst commanded the stormtroopers of the Reich capital. Did Hitler order him executed for being gay? What did this man know that sealed his fate? Stay until the end to find out what Karl Ernst did in his final seconds. Karl's origins. Karl Ernst, our protagonist today, was born in Berlin in 1904. He was the son of a cavalryman in the army. His childhood was modest, marked by hardship and by a reality that was gradually becoming harsher. It was not a life of privilege, but neither was it unusual for the time, especially in a Germany that, even before the war, already carried its own tensions and signs of instability. When the First World War ended in 1918, the country Karl knew was simply no longer the same. Germany was devastated, not only physically, but also morally and economically. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh conditions, humiliated the nation before the world, and left deep scars on German society. The economy collapsed, inflation spiraled out of control, and within a few years, money had lost all value, while the savings of entire families were reduced to nothing, practically overnight. It was in this climate of chaos and uncertainty that the young Karl Ernst grew up with few prospects and no clear opportunities. Surrounded by a constant atmosphere of crisis, he ended up being pushed into Berlin's darker corners. He first got work as a hotel bellhop, a simple job, sure, but one that put him in contact with different layers of society and with the city's bustle. Then he took another step and began working as security at a gay nightclub in the underworld of the German capital. Berlin in the 20s was a city of extreme contrasts. At the same time that it was sinking into political and economic crises, it was also becoming a vibrant center of nightlife, culture, and freedom, especially in the more bohemian districts. It was a city where luxury and misery coexisted side by side. And it was precisely in this environment, full of excesses, tensions, and contradictions, that Karl Ernst began shaping his worldview, a place that, ironically, would eventually play a decisive role in his entire path. But for Karl, that wasn't enough. The doors of a nightclub, however busy they might have been, did not represent the final destination he imagined for himself. He wanted more. He wanted to rise, to grow, to gain some kind of power amid the chaos around him. There was a quiet ambition there, fed by a context in which everything seemed possible, including dangerous paths. And Germany at that time, unstable and on the brink of constant collapse, was about to offer exactly that kind of opportunity, albeit in a very dark way. The Weimar Republic, proclaimed in 1919, was trying to keep afloat a country deeply weakened, divided by extremes, and burdened by resentment. The hyperinflation of 1923 destroyed the already fragile middle class, while the crisis of 1929 plunged millions of Germans into unemployment, deepening collective despair and heightening the sense that collapse was imminent. In that void of hopelessness, extremist movements began to gain strength. Paramilitary groups took to the streets, asserting their presence through violence and fear. Bitter veterans radicalized unemployed men with no future. They all wanted simple answers to complex problems. They wanted someone to blame and, more than that, someone to follow, someone who promised order amid chaos. And it was exactly in this setting that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party found the perfect ground on which to grow. Amid crisis, revolt, and a desperate search for direction, there emerged a force that promised to restore Germany's lost greatness, whatever the cost. The Nazi Party and the SA. Well, in 1923, Karl Ernst made a decision that would completely change the course of his life and, in a way, place him at the center of one of the darkest periods in German history. He joined the SA, the Sturmabteilung, or Storm Detachment, the Nazi Party's famous brown shirts. In practice, the SA was the movement's violent arm. Its role was direct and brutal, to intimidate opponents, beat up communists, raid and destroy Union headquarters, and spread fear among Jews and any group considered an enemy. They were not formal soldiers, nor did they follow traditional military rules. They were street thugs, shaped by violence, true political thugs used to impose the party's power and dominate the streets. And Karl Ernst fit this profile perfectly. He was not just violent, he was loyal, charismatic, and, above all, he knew how to navigate that chaotic environment. He understood hierarchies, quickly saw who had power and how to get close to those figures, knew whom to please, when to act, and, above all, when to stand out. This rise caught the attention of Ernst Röhm, the supreme leader of the SA and one of the most influential men in the Nazi Party at the time. In April 1931, Röhm promoted KK to supreme leader of the SA in Berlin, a position of enormous power, especially in such a politically volatile city. The following year, with Röhm's direct support, Ernst still managed to be elected to the Reichstag, cementing his position not only on the streets but also within the regime's political structure. Think about what a leap that is. A nightclub bouncer from Berlin's underworld now commanded hundreds of thousands of armed men in Germany's capital and held a prominent political office. It was an almost unbelievable meteoric rise, but behind the scenes, there was something that did not go unnoticed. In the corridors of the party, among whispers and discreet glances, a rumor circulated that no one dared to say openly. The relationship between Hahn and Ernst seemed to go beyond a simple military hierarchy. There was a closeness between them, something that gave rise to distrust, speculation, and, above all, comments full of prejudice and hostility. Pum, after all, was one of the most powerful men in Germany and was also openly homosexual, something extremely contradictory within a movement that officially condemned this kind of behavior. Even so, as long as it was useful for the party's growth and for the consolidation of Nazi power, that contradiction was conveniently ignored by the leadership. For Karl Ernst, his superior was a mentor, protector, and political patron. It was he who opened the doors to power and ensured that Ernst rose quickly through the SA hierarchy, shielding him from more direct criticism and cementing his position. Within the organization itself, however, this did not go unremarked. Some SA members began calling him the Lady of Horsby, a nickname used to ridicule the supposed closeness between the two. It was a veiled taunt, but one that said a great deal about the internal atmosphere and the tensions that already existed there. Even so, no one dared to cross certain lines. As long as Röhm remained at the top, protected by his influence and closeness to power, everything stayed confined to whispers. Comments were made in hushed voices. Jokes circulated among closed circles, but publicly, silence still prevailed. Under Ernst H's protection, Karl Ernst plunged fully into the regime's machinery of violence. There was no longer any room for ambiguity. He was now an active part of a machine built to intimidate, persecute, and eliminate any form of opposition. He was no longer just a participant. He was the key piece in that system. The Berlin SA began to act with even greater aggression. Rival political meetings were broken up by force, opponents' offices were raided and destroyed, and Jews were beaten in broad daylight in the streets of the capital. The violence was constant, almost routine. The methods often resembled practices from the Middle Ages. Cruelty was not excess. It was part of the system, encouraged and tolerated. In 1931, Ernst personally led an attack on Jews leaving a synagogue in Berlin. The attackers were shouting, "Death to the Jews!" as they moved against anyone identified as Jewish, or even anyone who merely showed sympathy. The result was immediate. Dozens were injured, panic spread through the streets, and the sense that no one was truly safe. That was a display of force, a clear message from those who ruled the streets. This was Ernst, not a distant bureaucrat hiding behind a desk and making cold decisions, but a direct enforcer, present and involved in the violence that helped sustain the regime's growth. And still, believe me, the worst was yet to come. What do you think of today's video, huh?
Hey, are you already subscribed to the channel? Take this short break to do that, all right? Also, turn on notifications and leave a like, okay? If you want to learn more interesting facts about the past, then comment, "I want more stories." That way, you directly support the continuation of our work, and you'll help us bring this content to as many people as possible. Okay? Let's get back to Karl Ernst. Now we move to February 27, 1933. The German parliament, the Reichstag, was consumed by flames. A fire that started during the night and quickly grew to gigantic proportions. Images of the burning building spread across the country and shocked the public. And within a few hours, that event was already being treated as a turning point in German history. The Nazis immediately blamed the communists. Adolf Hitler wasted no time and used the fire as a justification to consolidate his power. Shortly afterward, he signed the Reichstag decree suspending fundamental civil liberties and authorizing the mass arrest of political opponents. It was a decisive move, the moment when Germany's already weakened democracy practically ceased to exist. As for the fire itself, there are still historical debates to this day, but some accounts and interpretations suggest that Karl Ernst may have played a direct role in the operation. According to these versions, he would have led a group of SA men who, using a possible underground access, spread gasoline and other flammable substances inside the building, helping the fire spread rapidly. If that is true, and many historians consider this hypothesis plausible, the impact is hard to ignore. The former hotel messenger, the nightclub security guard, now linked to one of the most decisive events of the 20th century. In January 1933, when Hitler became chancellor, the SA already had about 3 million members, an impressive number, roughly 30 times larger than what the Treaty of Versailles allowed the German army. It was a massive force, often disorganized, but extremely useful to the regime, especially for controlling the streets. And in Berlin, control of this machine was in the hands of Karl Ernst. He directly commanded this structure in the capital and also wielded influence over the SA's so-called field police, an instrument used to persecute, intimidate, and eliminate opponents. In practice, Ernst had become one of the most powerful figures in Germany at that moment, with both political and violent reach. The SA's success ended up creating its own poison. The more the organization grew, the harder it became to control, and the more threatening it seemed, even to those who had helped bring it to power. Ernst wanted more, much more. He was not satisfied with commanding a force that marched through the streets. His goal was ambitious: to turn the SA into Germany's official military force, absorbing the regular army and taking over once and for all as the country's main armed power. He spoke openly about the need for a second revolution, something that would go beyond politics and also affect Germany's economic and social structure. But this idea was interpreted as a kind of alarm or warning for different sectors of Germany at the same time. The generals of the traditional army saw the SA as a direct threat to their authority and prestige. For them, allowing that mass of undisciplined men to replace the professional army was unthinkable. Industrialists, in turn, feared any talk that even resembled a social revolution, especially coming from a movement that was already showing radical tendencies. And within the regime itself, figures like Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring came to see Rome as a dangerous rival, someone who had to be contained before it was too late. Himmler, together with his right-hand man, Reinhard Heydrich, decided to go beyond political rivalry. They began building a narrative that would justify the elimination of the SA leadership. Documents were forged, information was manipulated,
all to create the impression that Rome and his men were planning a coup against the regime itself. It was the kind of accusation that, in that context, did not need to be entirely true. It only had to seem plausible. While this conspiracy was unfolding behind the scenes, Hitler watched everything with great coldness. As always, he was pragmatic and calculating. He understood that sooner or later he would have to choose a side. And it is worth noting that there was one more factor weighing on this equation, something directly linked to Karl Ernst. Ernst was not just a loyal subordinate, he was someone who knew too much. According to reports from the historian Ernst Stagel, Karl had knowledge of compromising secrets about Hitler himself, information that, if it came to light, could cause serious damage to the Führer's image. In a regime upheld by absolute control, carefully constructed image, that was an unacceptable risk. In the end, the logic was simple. A man who knows too much is a man who cannot continue to exist. The Night of the Long Knives. On June 30th, 1934, Adolf Hitler finally gave the order. The operation that would come to be known as the Night of the Long Knives began at dawn, swiftly, in a coordinated way, and with no room to react. The goal was, of course, to eliminate any internal threat to the regime, real or not. Ernst was arrested while he slept in his hotel in Bad Wiessee. Other SA leaders were captured in different parts of the country, on trains, in offices, and in homes. No one had time to understand what was happening, and Karl Ernst at that moment was far from any conspiracy. He was at the dock in Bremerhaven, about to board for his honeymoon in Tenerife with his new wife. In theory, it was the start of a new personal chapter, but there was not even time for that. His car was surrounded by SS men. Without warning, they opened fire. The driver was hit. His wife broke down in panic, screaming, not understanding what was happening. In the middle of the chaos, Ernst was dragged from the vehicle by force, still trying to cling to the reality he knew. He was shouting, "Heil Hitler!" Perhaps out of loyalty, perhaps out of desperation, without understanding or without wanting to accept that it was Hitler himself who had signed his death warrant. He was taken first to BON, where he was handed over to an SA unit commanded by Kurt Gildisch. There the interrogations began, and with them, the violence. The exact details were never fully recorded. The Nazi regime was extremely careful to erase traces and control the narrative. Even so, historians agree that Ernst, like the other SA leaders captured that day, was tortured before his execution. Brutality was part of the process. After Bonn, he was put on a plane back to Berlin. In the late afternoon of that same 30th of June, Karl was taken to the barracks of the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, Hitler's personal guard. There, before a firing squad, his life came to an end. He was only 29. According to historical accounts, his final moments were marked by despair. To the end, he believed there had been some mistake, that someone would show up to stop it, that somehow Hitler could not have allowed it. But there was no mistake, and there was no intervention. The order had already been given, and the bullet was real. Days later, on July 13, 1934, Hitler gave a speech in the Reichstag and presented his version of events. He declared that the conspirators had been eliminated in the name of state security. The official figure released was 61 dead, but historical estimates point to at least 85 victims, possibly many more. Karl's death was officially recorded as participation in an attempted coup. A convenient version, but of course false, right? He wasn't organizing any conspiracy. He wasn't plotting an uprising. He was simply on his way to his honeymoon. Karl's rise and fall exposes an uncomfortable truth about the Nazi regime, and more broadly, about any system built on fear and blind loyalty. No enforcer is indispensable, and no accomplice is truly safe. The very system you help strengthen can, at some point, turn on you with the same efficiency and without the slightest hesitation. Ernst actively took part in the regime's violence, helping to persecute, assault, and consolidate the power of a political machine built on terror. For a time, that earned him power, influence, and protection. But in regimes like that, protection, after all, is never the same as safety. It is only a temporary illusion. And in the end, he was eliminated by that same machine, as Victor Klemperer wrote about the victims of the Night of the Long Knives. It did not escape many that several of these victims had played the central role in bringing Hitler to power. The sentence carries a weight that is hard to ignore. Many of the men who helped build a regime were later deemed disposable by it. The executioner became a corpse, and the machine devoured its own operators. Because when power rests on fear, that is the only guarantee it offers. Sooner or later, everyone can become the next victim. Do you think Karl Ernst was a victim of the regime he helped build? Or was his end simply the inevitable consequence of choosing to serve a monster, huh? Leave a comment below. I want to know what you think. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. That way, you won't miss any of the next videos. Thanks for watching another production. See you again soon, huh? Take care, and until then,